Lucy finally crosses a line, the ghoul betrays her, and Robert House admits that he doesn't really know who's in control. Welcome back, and today we're going to be discussing the massive lore drops from Fallout Season 2, Episode 5, The Wrangler. This episode isn't just about plot progression, it's the moment where the show's moral lines blur, and the shadow players finally start to step out of the dark. We're talking about Lucy's dark turn in the Freeside, the truth behind Vault 31's FEV experiments, and a pre-war conspiracy that proves Robert House wasn't the biggest shark in the tank. So stick around because we're going to be uncovering the variable that might just be the proof behind the fact the Enclave may have started it all. We pick up right where we left off in Episode 4. Lucy and the ghoul are staring down not just one, but several death claws here on the New Vegas Strip.
I defer to you about what to do in this situation.
Run.
Now after running, they barely escape, slipping under a gate with the dog, arriving in the dusty, neon-lit streets of the Freeside. Now Lucy here is still reeling from her drug addiction, asking for some more drugs. So the ghoul is nice enough to give her a sack of caps and points her towards a shop to be able to go find a dick doll, which is going to help her with her drug addiction. But this isn't the golden rule Lucy that we've seen in the past. As we can see, prices for all the available chems are significantly jacked up, leaving Lucy with really just one option, and that is to steal. I find this plot point really interesting as it emphasizes in the wasteland the tests of your character and the choices you have to make in order to be able to survive. After grabbing the addict doll, she also grabbed a power fist, but then she hears the clerk coming down the stairs, and so she hides and prepares to be able to leave the shop. Before leaving, she notices this dead body in the trash here and wondering, who could this be? And that's when the shady clerk, who clearly doesn't look like those clothes fit him, and the show really emphasizes a point from the shoes to the shirt to the hat, everything. He notices her. Now Lucy, glancing up at this picture here of Sonny, notices that this is not the same individual. So she questions him. Are you in fact Sonny? Do you work here? To which this shady clerk, who's actually a squatter, replied that the real owner's out of town. Lucy, not looking for trouble, decides that she's just going to try to leave. The shop clerk has some other plans that we can see as he starts to stare at the pistols here on the wall, that he's not going to take any chances. This leads to a pretty quick scuffle where Lucy commits her first cold blood kill, and then she walks out with her addict doll and swipes a power fist for good measure. I believe this is a turning point for Lucy's character. In this episode, her character is being tested, and we're seeing that her vault-born morality is starting to crumble. Lucy is still a good character, but she is no longer innocent. And the show is telling us something very important, that the wasteland changes everyone. Switching back to the ghoul, he walks into the Atomic Wrangler with one thing in mind, to get some drinks. So he sits down and he asks the bartender for some whiskey. And this is where we get a series of flashbacks from his time as Cooper Howard, right here in pre-war Las Vegas. So now Cooper Howard is going to be heading to Las Vegas with his wife Barb, where she's pitching the cold fusion tech to Robco's Mr. House at an expo with all the big players, Vault Tech, West Tech, Big Mountain. Before they get on the plane, Cooper here with his wife indicated that he needed to call his agents, although who he's really going to call is Moldaver. From what we recall from previous episodes, Moldaver had asked Cooper Howard to assassinate Mr. House. Moldaver giving the information to Cooper Howard that there's a serum he can use to complete the mission. And Cooper Howard refuses to assassinate Mr. House, but he does agree to sabotage the cold fusion deal that's going to take place in New Vegas. And now we arrive here in the Strip, and boy, the pre-war Strip is so glorious to see. Cooper and his wife arrive here at the Lucky 38, and outside there's a protest happening. With this confrontation going on, this is none other than the Congresswoman Diane Welch, who is the same Congresswoman that we seen 2 episodes ago in the VFW event with the flashback we seen with Cooper Howard and his friend Charlie. Now, she's clutching this flag and complaining about the corporate greed and overreach in the government, which is echoing some of her complaints from the VFW event that she attended, claiming that she was the only congressperson to not accept corporate donations. Now she gets dragged off from this event and kicked out, and Cooper helps her up here and keeps telling her to fight the good fight. I think her presence here is very deliberate, and this is a second reoccurrence we've seen her in, and she is positioning herself as very anti-corporate and a genuine populist. But why is she here at this elite and obviously restricted event? This raises a big question for us, and I'm curious about her possible connections to the Enclave. Is she a front for the Enclave, which, as we know, is the real shadow government? Because this was the organization that was pulling the strings behind the curtain. I think we may see more of Diane in future episodes. Inside the Lucky 38, Barbara explains to Cooper that she needs to go talk to her investors. Cooper, on the other hand, explains that he needs to go get a drink, but really what he's looking for is Hank and possibly Mr. House. Now, throughout season 2, there have been 2 actors portraying Mr. House. There was some speculation as to maybe one of them was the brother. It was also possible that House was using a body double. And right here is where we get our confirmation that this is not actually Robert House. He tells Cooper Howard that Mr. House wants to see him. Now inside, Mr. House confronts Cooper and he reveals that he's been tracking him. House knows about the assassination plot, but he drops some heavy lore here. He indicates that he has spent a fortune on the missile defense system for Las Vegas, and he's been preparing these defenses, but he admits that there's a variable that has been shifting the timeline of the Great War, and it's been messing with his apocalypse predictions. He insists that Vault-Tec won't be the ones to drop the bombs, but instead he believes that something else is pulling the strings. During this engagement between Mr. House and Cooper, House tells Cooper that he knows everything.
And what I do is I know everything.
But then later, towards the end of their engagement, Mr. House tells him that he knows almost everything, but what he doesn't know is who's really in control. And what he says next is very interesting. To me, this screams Enclave theory, really hints at what we're going to see in the next couple of episodes.
I believe there is another player at the table.
From previous lore, we know that the government was responsible for the development of the Death Claws. Now, the theory here is that House knows Vault-Tec wants to drop the bomb, but he suspects that there's a shadow government, likely the Enclave in this case, is actually the one pulling the trigger that's going to force a reset before House is ready, and it's going to accelerate the war timing. They don't necessarily need to rule openly. Cooper decides to leave his engagement with Mr. House, and he starts hitting the drinks hard. So while Cooper is stumbling and bumbling after having several drinks, if you blink you might miss this, but we get a quick glimpse of Stephanie here that's guiding him around. It's unclear what her deal was or why she's here, but she's definitely tied somehow. Maybe there's a connection to Hank here, and potentially why she is asking for Hank's keepsake that is in Vault 33, which we had seen in a previous episode. So we'll dive into the core plot line with Hank McClane, and here we have a return of the snake oil salesman from season 1. And the salesman is on his way to New Vegas, walking his way through the desert. Now, before the salesman is captured by Hank McClane, which we'll get into here in a minute, he's having an interaction here with a Protectron that looks very strikingly similar to the one that we see in Fallout New Vegas, named Fisto. While the robot in this episode goes by a different name, the interaction that we see is a very clear Easter egg for a lot of the fans that have played the game. But unfortunately for the salesman, Hank McClane shows up. He ambushes him, he knocks him out, and he hauls him off to the Vault-Tec headquarters and attaches a mind control unit to his neck. One quick thing to note, here in the Vault-Tec headquarters, we do get a glimpse that Barbara Howard and her daughter, Janie Howard's cryocells are here. So now Hank McClane offers the salesman a choice. So now I don't know why Hank McClane gave the impression that he was offering a choice here when clearly he was going to test out his theory or his experiment on the snake oil salesman. But he asks him if he wanted to forget everything that he's ever known, every decision he's made, but he would retain things like basic speech and motor skills. The oil salesman agrees, and Hank gets to work testing out his experiment to see if this guy's head will blow up. Now, we've seen this scene before, and just as I was expecting that familiar guts to splatter on the window, surprisingly we don't see that. Now relieved, Hank here looks at the salesman and decides we can get to work. Now back here over in Freeside, Lucy tracks down the ghoul to his hotel room after she acquired the addictol, and things get pretty tense here. Before we see this individual show up here in the hotel room wearing the mind control device, which we can only assume at this point is a snake oil salesman that Hank McClane has dispatched. And here he is, looking quite a bit cleaned up from how we previously seen him. And he explains to Lucy and the ghoul that Lucy's father, Hank, wants her to come to the Vault-Tec headquarters and asks the ghoul to trade Lucy for his family. Now, after some contemplation, the ghoul bites on the trade deal, and he admits to Lucy that she has always been just his bargaining chip. It's very sad to see this because we've seen their bond grow throughout Season 1 and Season 2. So, Lucy a bit heartbroken here, and the ghoul, accepting his decision, he shoots a tranquilizer dart into Lucy. But just before Lucy blacks out, she somehow finds her edge. She puts on the power fist, and she blasts the ghoul right out the window, launching him onto a spike below and impales him. The future of the ghoul is uncertain, although I will say in some of the previous trailer reveals, I believe we do see the ghoul still alive in the future. This is kind of one of my criticisms about how they revealed too much, I think, in some of these trailers. But nonetheless, this is quite the cliffhanger to end off on for the ghoul. Now Lucy, just at the point of blacking out here on the ground, she sees somebody enter the room, which turns out to be her dad Hank. Shows up just in time to be able to grab her. I felt like this hurt quite a bit because we finally start to see some form of trust building between the two of them, Lucy and the ghoul. This partnership may in fact be shattered, at least for now, but we'll see what happens in future episodes. Switching over to the plotline involving Norm and the Vault 31 crew. They've infiltrated the Vault-Tec headquarters and exploring this ruined building. It's familiar to all of them. It felt just like yesterday, except now that 200 plus years have passed. We see some familiar faces here from Season 1 that have now taken over this location. One of them explains that they see more Vault Dwellers, to which Norm says, "What do you mean, more Vault Dwellers?" And he asks her about his sister Lucy, to which she explains the last time she had seen her was not a good situation and that his sister is probably dead. Now Ronnie here seems to be taking charge and really trying to get things back together. So now Norm sees Claudia back here in the background, and he's got an idea to try to see if he can probe her for some information to really find out what's going on. And she's crying, and as she explains that she's just an intern and she doesn't really know much of anything. But when Norm asked her who is really in charge around here in Vault-Tec, she explains that Barbara Howard was one of the key leadership individuals, to which Norm asks, do you know where her office is located at? So now the two of them go up and find Barbara's office, be able to go and find information about what's going on. Ronnie, on the other hand, sees them and is wondering what is going on here. Now Norm starts looking on the computer for anything about the future Enterprise ventures. I think the community during the last episode was really highlighting the fact that the acronym for this was FEV. So maybe Future Enterprise Ventures was really just a cover for the FEV, Forced Evolutionary Virus, from what we know from the video games. So while the computer did not return anything on Future Enterprise Ventures, it did suggest FEV, which we know to be the Forced Evolutionary Virus. So from what we know, the Future Enterprise Ventures was a front. Phase 1 of the experiment was about breeding super managers, and then Phase 2, possibly injecting FEV to supercharge the dwellers and turning the remaining Vault Dwellers from 32 and 33 into enhanced managers for some sort of wasteland conquest. This ties back to some of the lore that we know in the video games of FEV and how West-Tec was using this to create super soldiers, but Vault-Tec obviously had also twisted it for experiments as well. Just as Norm was starting to connect the dots between Phase 1 and Phase 2, Ronnie here overhears everything. He calls Norm a traitor, and a scuffle ensues, and Norm gets choked out. Now how this ends, Norm is not killed. He's down, but he's clearly not out. This potentially sets up a Vault 31 showdown, which tells us one thing. The truth is dangerous. Chet is on to Steph's pre-war origins from her ID that he found. The keepsake box from Betty might just hide details about the FEV delivery clues, potentially through maybe the water system. And this is the cliffhanger we get for this plot line with Norm and the Vault 31 crew. Here's a quick lore cameo from this episode. Did you all happen to spot the Dean Domino poster that was here in Freeside? Domino is a pre-war singer that turned ghoul. He was very greedy, paranoid, self-serving, and trapped in the Sierra Madre casino heist that had gone wrong. From what I recall about playing the Dead Money DLC in Fallout New Vegas, your choices that you make in there really decide his fate. If you stay on his good side and avoid barter checks that bruise his ego and don't dominate the conversations, he survives. But if he turns hostile, which occurred in my playthrough, where he was just out for himself, I had to take him out and I had to kill him. So classic with some of the original Fallout games, we get these branching endings. And the message that we receive from here was that pre-war greed always destroys itself. And I think that's a theme that fits this episode very perfectly. So here's where the pieces are moving for the final episodes. And let's tie these plot lines together with some solid theories that have been floating around. First, Lucy and the ghoul. Hank's got Lucy now, and he's likely hauling her to the Vault-Tec's headquarters in order to fix her with the mind control technology. Some theories out there say that he wants total control, not just a reunion. But wiping her wasteland experiences in order to fit Vault-Tec's narrative, maybe even brainwashing her against the ghoul. But the ghoul, though, he pulls himself off of that spike, regenerates, and then he goes full revenge mode. The trailers that we had seen before show him alive, but probably chasing Hank for his family. Their bond is now shattered, but it might be rebuilt if Lucy escapes and they team up against the bigger threats. Let's see if the ghoul ends up hunting down the cold fusion technology as a peace offering to House. So now Hank and Vault-Tec. I believe Hank is probably tied to the Enclave. The quote unknown party that House mentioned, the variable. It's likely the Enclave that's accelerating the war, and Hank's mind control gadget screams Enclave technology. If we remember from the Enclave's FEV experiments for pure humans, he might be rebuilding their shadow government and using the cold fusion technology for unlimited power. I expect Hank is probably going to reveal some of this plan to Lucy in the coming episodes, especially with regards to the cold fusion technology that we know Maximus has. As far as Vaults 31, 32, and 33 are concerned, Phase 2 I think kicks off with some sort of plan for an FEV injection, which may potentially impact the dwellers in there. I don't think they'll be turned into super mutants, and I'm not too sure that we'll actually see that happen. But we do know the plan was likely intended to enhance managers that were being bred from Vault 31 for some sort of a potential wasteland conquest. So in the future episode, I think Norm's going to wake up and he's going to attempt to rally as the voice of reason. Ronnie and some of the other buds are probably going to push forward, but I think there's going to be some sort of infighting that erupts. And I think this is going to set up a conflict between one side to implement the FEV Phase 2, turning the dwellers into what they believe to be super managers, not knowing the impact that it actually has. So the Enclave reveal in this episode, I believe Congresswoman Welch in this episode wasn't a coincidence, and I believe it was a direct plant to portend what we might see in future episodes for the Enclave. I don't necessarily know if Congresswoman Welch is part of the Enclave, but I don't believe that it's a coincidence. I think her presence is really designed to either keep tabs on what's happening with Big Corporation, or potentially what ends up occurring gives the Enclave the excuse to seize control when the bombs fall. Nonetheless, I believe we'll be able to see more of these breadcrumbs in the next episode. So now the Brotherhood and the Legion were skipped in this episode. We'll have to see what happens with the Legion. As far as the rest of the Brotherhood and the Legion are concerned, that remains unclear, and I'm not necessarily sure if we're going to see too much more in this season outside of some potential setup with interactions with the Commonwealth chapter. As far as the Legion is concerned, I believe we might see a bit more from them, but it's very unclear what their role is going to be in the next couple of episodes, other than a source of destabilization. Some final thoughts. So this episode overall isn't really about action, it's about control, and who they think is going to run the world, and who actually does. Episode 5 really cranked up the stakes, but what do you think's going to happen next? Drop your theories below, and let me know what you think, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everyone.